He clawed at the door until his paws bled, long after the bullets stopped flying, long after the world gave up. In the ruin of a forgotten battlefield, something impossible survived, something that would not let go. They thought it was over. They thought no one remembered. But beneath the ash and silence, loyalty still breathed, stubborn and unbroken. This is not the story of a soldier, not yet. This is the story of the one who refused to leave him behind. If you have ever believed in second chances, in silent promises stronger than death, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from, and when did you last feel someone fought for you without asking anything in return? The night had a weight to it, a thick, oppressive heaviness that seeped through the thin cracks of the battered windows and clung to the walls like damp fog. It was the kind of night that didn't simply fall, it smothered. Sergeant Adam Cole sat in the middle of the crumbling living room, knees apart, his elbows digging into them, both hands wrapped around a cold, worn revolver. A single dim bulb swung from the cracked ceiling, creaking with every groan of the old house. Rain rattled against the windows like 1,000 desperate fingers. Outside, the world was a blur of black and storm, but inside, everything was still. Too still. Adam stared at the revolver as if it might speak, as if it could offer something more than a quiet, final end. The barrel gleamed under the faint light, a promise whispered without words. He inhaled sharply, tasting dust and regret. There was no ceremony for it, no long, tearful letters, no final calls. He was tired, bone deep, soul deep in a way that sleep could never fix. His uniform jacket, with medals still pinned to the breast, hung limply on the coat rack across the room, a relic of another life. The silence roared louder than any battlefield he'd ever stepped onto. His thumb brushed over the hammer, feeling its cruel certainty. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked loud, insistent, counting down. Adam squeezed his eyes shut, pulling in a breath so broken it rattled in his chest. It would be simple, just one clean pull. No more nightmares, no more guilt clawing its way up from the depths at 3 a.m. No more remembering the ones he couldn't save. Just nothing. A breath, a squeeze, a fall into darkness. But then, a sound. A sharp thud behind him, startling in the oppressive quiet. His eyes snapped open. At first he thought he had imagined it, a ghost noise born from a mind teetering on the brink. But then he turned, slow, sluggish, and saw it. A frame that had hung above the fireplace, now lying face down on the dusty hardwood floor. The nail it had once hung from swayed gently as if the house itself was exhaling. Adam stared at the fallen frame, pulse pounding in his ears. For a moment, neither he nor the house moved. Hesitation, foreign and unwelcome, seeped into his fingers. Setting the revolver down with a heavy clink against the coffee table, he rose. His legs protested, stiff and reluctant, but he shuffled toward the frame, drawn by a force he couldn't name. He knelt, reaching out with trembling hands. When he flipped over, he found himself looking into the past. The photo faded, the colors bled into softness by time, but the subjects were clear. A younger Adam in uniform, laughing, one arm wrapped tight around the neck of a massive German shepherd. Both of them covered in dust and sweat, but alive, vivid in a way he no longer felt. Rex. The name rose unbidden, thick in his throat. Rex, the dog who had pulled him from burning wreckage, who had stood between him and death more times than he could count. The last time Adam had seen him was on a battlefield far from here, a bloody tangle of gunfire and smoke. Rex had gone missing in the chaos, presumed dead. The photo slipped from Adam's fingers, landing with a soft puff of dust. His vision blurred, but he blinked it back. No, he had made peace with that loss, hadn't he? Another weight among many. He staggered back to the couch, the revolver like a magnet to his despairing hand. The photo had disturbed the rhythm of his resignation, but it hadn't erased it. Rain continued its relentless assault on the windows. The clock resumed its ticking. Adam exhaled slowly, raised the revolver once more and pressed the cold barrel against his temple. His finger found the trigger, curled around it. Pressure built, tears he hadn't even known were waiting slid down his face, uninitiated, unimportant. A tremor raced through him, but he forced it down. Just a squeeze, he thought. Just a squeeze and it's done. His fingertip began to tighten. Then another sound, sharp, urgent. It cut through the house like a blade. Adam froze. His eyes darted to the door. Again the sound came, louder this time. Scraping, clawing. His heart lurched painfully against his ribs. Not the wind, not the storm. This was deliberate. Alive. Cautious, trembling, he lowered the revolver and stood, his entire body taut with something he couldn't define. Fear, hope, madness. The sound continued, a furious scratching, like nails raking against the wood of the front door. Adam stumbled toward it, almost against his will. His boots thudded heavily across the floorboards. Closer. The noise grew frantic, desperate. He hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. The rain hammered down, the storm howled, but all he could hear was that scratching, pleading, insistent, relentless. A sob tore itself free from his chest, raw and ragged. Something was out there. Something that couldn't, let him go. His fingers found the knob. He turned it. The door creaked open with a reluctant groan, shuddering on its rusted hinges as Adam pulled it toward him. His breath caught halfway in his throat. The storm immediately rushed in like a living thing, cold and furious, slicing through the stale warmth of the house and making the single bulb overhead flicker violently. He squinted against the rain, the darkness beyond dense and swirling, but there was nothing. No figure, no intruder. Just the howling wind, the sheeted rain hammering the ground, the endless, aching emptiness. His heart, which had been hammering against his ribs a moment before, seemed to slow in confusion, stumbling over its own frantic rhythm. For a long moment, Adam simply stood there, hands still gripping the doorknob, body straining forward as if daring the storm to reveal what had clawed so desperately at his door. Then he glanced downward. His breath hitched painfully. Across the threshold, in the pool of light spilling from the battered house, clear against the warped wooden boards now slick with rain, were prints. Not footprints, paw prints. Deep, deliberate, as though whatever had made them had scrabbled frantically to get inside. Each claw mark sharp and unmistakable. His mind recoiled, instinct screamed at him to slam the door shut, to lock it and bolt himself against the impossible. But his feet betrayed him, moving forward, out into the tempest as if drawn by invisible strings. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, soaked through the thin fabric of his t-shirt in seconds. But he hardly noticed. His eyes were locked onto the trail of prints leading away from the door, curving around the porch steps and vanishing into the night. They were real, tangible, not a hallucination, not another ghost conjured by a broken mind. He staggered onto the porch, boots slipping slightly on the wet wood. The night seemed to press closer, the wind wailing like some mournful spirit. Adam's hands curled into fists at his sides, fighting the tremble that wanted to take him. He should turn back. Yet some ancient, stubborn part of him, some piece that remembered sun-baked training fields and the solid, unwavering presence of a German shepherd at his heel, refused to let him retreat. Adam stepped down into the yard, mud sucking at his boots, eyes scanning wildly, heart clawing against his ribs. "Hello?" His voice was ragged, shredded by disbelief. "Is someone there?" Only the storm answered. And yet he wasn't alone. Movement caught the edge of his vision. He whipped his head toward it, breath freezing in his lungs. There, at the base of the staircase that led to the second floor of the house, half hidden in shadow, half illuminated by the swinging bulb overhead, sat a shape. No, not sat, waited. Water dripped steadily from its sodden fur, pooling around its paws. The figure was unmistakably canine, large and heavy-shouldered, its posture rigid yet oddly patient, as if it had all the time in the world. Adam's mouth went dry. The dog was soaked, its black and tan coat clinging tightly to the lean muscle underneath. Its head was slightly bowed, ears pricked, and eyes, dear God, those eyes glowed faintly in the half-light, locked unwaveringly onto Adam. For a long, shuddering second, Adam's mind refused to process what he was seeing. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. Rex was gone. He had gone, lost in the chaos of that final blood-drenched mission overseas, when everything had burned and screamed and fallen apart. He had seen the wreckage himself, had screamed Rex's name into the inferno until his voice tore and bled, had waited for days, hoping, searching, begging God or fate or whatever cruel power ruled the world to give him a sign. And there had been nothing. Only silence. Only the slow, grinding machine of the military bureaucracy handed him a folded flag and a perfunctory condolence. But here, now, in the shattered ruin of his life, on a night meant for dying, Rex sat waiting. Adam stumbled forward a step, then another, blinking rain from his eyes, half expecting the vision to dissolve into mist, into madness. Rex? His voice cracked and broke around the name, as fragile as glass. The dog didn't move, didn't flinch, simply watched him, a silent sentinel. Adam dropped to his knees with a choked sound, mud splattering up his jeans, uncaring. His hands trembled as he reached out, terrified to touch, terrified to find only air. Yet even from here, even in the confusion and terror roiling inside him, he recognized the dog's stance. The slight tilt of his head, the barely perceptible twitch of his ears. Rex always did that when waiting for a command. Always. Rex, he whispered again, pleading this time, and the dog's tail so slowly, so subtly he thought he might have imagined it, thumped once against the wooden floor. It was real. He was real. Tears blurred Adam's vision again, but this time he made no effort to blink them away. He surged forward on hands and knees, desperate to close the distance, desperate to touch, to feel the heat and solidity that would tell him he hadn't finally completely shattered. But as he moved, Rex rose smoothly to his feet, muscles rippling under his rain-slicked fur, and turned away, his paws leaving muddy impressions with every step. Adam gasped, reaching out instinctively, but the dog was already padding up the stairs, silent as a shadow, never once looking back. Without thinking, without breathing, Adam scrambled to his feet and followed, heart hammering painfully in his chest. The staircase groaned under their combined weight, each step a loud protest in the aching silence. Rain dripped from his hair, his clothes pooling on the stairs. Ahead of him, Rex moved with uncanny purpose, always just far enough ahead that Adam could see him but never close enough to reach. As they climbed higher, the darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing the edges of the world until all Adam could see was the faint silhouette of the dog he had thought lost forever. And somewhere deep inside him, under the fear, under the confusion, under the raw, bleeding wreckage of his heart, something ancient and broken, a question he wasn't ready to ask, an answer he wasn't sure he wanted. Adam's lungs burned with the effort of following, heart hammering against the inside of his chest like a prisoner demanding release. The stairwell narrowed as he ascended, the air growing colder, heavier, almost viscous against his skin. Each creak of the steps beneath his boots felt magnified, echoing off the peeling wallpaper and cracked plaster. The dog, the impossible, soaking wet figure of Rex, was just ahead of him, never gaining distance but never allowing Adam to catch up either. At the landing, Rex paused. Adam froze too, one foot on the final step, chest heaving. He blinked rapidly, rainwater dripping from his lashes, smearing his vision into streaks of trembling light and shadow. He scrubbed the back of his hand across his eyes, desperate to banish the blur, to wipe away whatever hallucination he feared he was chasing. When he looked again, Rex was still there, solid, unwavering, his golden brown eyes locked onto Adam's, burning not with fear or challenge but with something far deeper, almost human in its urgency, a silent plea. Adam felt something inside him crumple, something he hadn't even realized was still intact, like an old, rotting bridge giving way under the weight of one last burden. He whispered hoarsely, "Rex," but the name barely carried across the 3 feet of warped wooden floor between them. The dog remained still, rain dripping from his ears, his paws forming tiny trembling pools at his feet. There was a sadness in that gaze, a profound sorrow that cut deeper than any blade. Adam inched forward, one cautious step, arm outstretched, palm open as if approaching a wounded creature. Every instinct, every memory of their years together screamed at him to close the distance, to kneel, to wrap his arms around Rex's powerful neck and never let go. But as Adam took that step, a small sound of a choked whimper escaped Rex's throat, and in the blink of an eye the dog turned. It wasn't a slow, uncertain movement. It was a decisive pivot, sharp and purposeful, like a soldier executing an urgent command. Rex sprinted down the hallway, nails clicking frantically against the hard wood, his wet fur flashing briefly in the erratic light before he was swallowed by shadow. "Wait!" Adam cried. The words ripped from him involuntarily. He stumbled after, feet slipping slightly on the soaked floorboards, heart lurching as he saw something new, a thin smear trailing behind Rex, barely visible in the dim light. Blood, fresh, bright against the faded wood. Adam's stomach twisted painfully. He hurried forward, following the trail with a gut-deep terror he couldn't fully explain. A certainty that if he lost sight of Rex now, he would lose something much greater than just his old companion. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, each step pulling him deeper into a labyrinth of half-forgotten memories and unspoken fears. The walls here were lined with old photographs, the frames askew, some glass cracked, others missing altogether, as if the house itself had long ago given up on preserving the past. Faces stared back at him, family members long dead, comrades lost in battles both literal and personal. And amid them, glimpses of Rex, caught in frozen moments of loyalty and strength. Rex leaping a barrier, Rex standing guard at Adam's side, Rex with a tongue-lolling grin beside a young soldier whose eyes still held something resembling hope. Adam's throat closed tight. He shook his head violently, trying to banish the flood of emotion threatening to drown him. "Focus," he muttered under his breath, the word barely audible over the storm's low moan leaking through the battered roof. "Just find him." The trail of blood grew more pronounced now, droplets becoming smears, as if Rex's strength was faltering, as if each step cost him more than he could afford to give. Adam pushed harder, legs burning, lungs gasping. Every fiber of his being screamed to close the distance, to not let the last good thing he had ever known slip away again. A door at the end of the hall stood slightly ajar, its paint peeling, hinges rusted. The blood led straight to it. Beyond the threshold, darkness yawned like an open mouth. Adam hesitated for half a heartbeat from what might wait on the other side, but then he caught another flash, Rex's tail disappearing into the room beyond, and all hesitation burned away under the raw flame of desperate need. He shoved the door open with his shoulder, the wood protesting with a long, groaning screech. Inside, the room was a cavern of shadows, lit only by the weak, swinging light from the hallway. The floor was littered with debris, shattered furniture, forgotten toys, paper stained by time and neglect. The smell of damp wood and old sorrow saturated the air. And there, near the far wall, Rex stood rigid, his body trembling slightly, head lowered as if bracing for something. Blood dripped steadily from a wound somewhere beneath his sodden fur, darkening the floorboards beneath his paws. Adam took a tentative step inside, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer carried. "Rex," he said again, softer this time, gentler. The voice of a man who had lost too much already. The dog didn't move, didn't even flick an ear. Instead, he stared at a spot on the wall. A shiver slid down Adam's spine, cold and electric. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Slowly, carefully, Adam angled himself to see what had captured Rex's attention. And when he saw it, the breath punched out of him as if he'd been struck. There, embedded in the rotting wall, half concealed by a tattered curtain, was a dark stain, a handprint. Humans, dried and cracked with age, but unmistakably a hand, fingers splayed wide in a desperate final act of reaching. For a long, terrible moment, Adam couldn't move, couldn't breathe, could only stand there, heart hammering in his ears as Rex's trembling frame seemed to will him forward, to command him to confront whatever waited beyond that silent scream frozen in time. Adam took one step closer, and then Rex, without warning, without sound, began to move again, limping now, slower, weaker, yet still pulling away, deeper into the darkness. Without thinking, without daring to imagine what he might find, Adam followed, the sound of his own pulse roaring louder than the storm that raged beyond the crumbling walls. Adam chased after Rex, each step pulling him deeper into the collapsing house until he burst through the shattered back door into the teeth of the storm. Rain slammed into him in cold, stinging sheets, soaking him anew, but he hardly noticed. His entire focus was on the dark, limping figure just ahead, barely visible through the curtain of water and swirling night. The world blurred into streaks of gray and black, the ground sucking at his boots with every desperate stride. He stumbled once, then again, catching himself on a half-rotted fence post, splinters digging into his palms. Rex didn't wait. The dog pushed onward with a grim determination, as if driven by a mission Adam couldn't yet comprehend. Adam gritted his teeth and followed, forcing his legs to move, lungs burning from the cold air and the exertion, heart hammering an uneven rhythm that seemed almost to match the thunder rolling above. The landscape around him twisted into something half familiar, half alien. Broken tree lines, muddy gullies, barbed wire snarled like veins ripped from the earth. It wasn't just the night he was running through, it was memory. Each step sank deeper into a mire that wasn't just physical but emotional, dragging up images he had spent years trying to bury. Sandbags collapsing under mortar fire, screams cutting the air like blades, the metallic stench of blood and burnt oil, the sensation of dirt in his mouth as he hit the ground, the wet weight of another man's body falling against his back. He shook his head violently, trying to banish the ghosts, but they clung to him with every stride, whispering from the shadows. Ahead, Rex forged onward, limping but unyielding, leaving a faint trail of blood that mixed with the rain and turned the earth to a dark, churning mess. Adam's chest tightened painfully. Every instinct screamed to catch him, to help, but no matter how he pushed, Rex stayed just out of reach, a living memory pulling him deeper into a night he thought he had escaped long ago. They crossed a narrow creek swollen with runoff, the current tugging at Adam's legs as he splashed through, boots nearly ripped from his feet. Mud clung to him, weighed him down, but he refused to stop. His breathing came in harsh, ragged gasps. He barely noticed when his jacket snagged on a rusted fence wire, tearing a jagged gash across his sleeve. All that mattered was the dark figure ahead, the only solid thing in a world unraveling around him. The terrain rose sharply, the ground turning rocky and uneven. Adam recognized this, somewhere deep in the marrow of his bones. This path, this incline, the way the trees bent low under the weight of history. Head curled in his gut, a sickening premonition that he already knew where Rex was leading him. He forced himself onward, every muscle screaming in protest, his body threatening to betray him under the sheer weight of what he was about to confront. Finally, they created the ridge. Adam stumbled to a halt, chest heaving, heart hammering so violently he thought it might shatter his ribs. Before him, bathed in the storm's silver fury, stretched a gaping scarf in the earth. The old trench, forgotten by time, hidden by overgrowth, but unmistakable to anyone who had ever bled into its dirt. The war zone of his nightmares, the place where he had died or thought he had, and the place where Rex had pulled him back from the abyss. Adam staggered forward, his boots squelching in the waterlogged soil, eyes wide with shock and something dangerously close to terror. The trench yawned before him, its broken walls collapsing inward, mud and debris piled like ancient bones. Rex stood at the edge, head lowered, tail stiff, his body vibrating with some desperate urgency. Adam's knees buckled, and he dropped heavily into the mud, memories hitting him like shrapnel. He remembered this place with horrifying clarity, the roar of gunfire, the shriek of mortars, the way the world had tilted and spun when the blast hit, the sensation of blood pouring from a gash in his side, the knowledge, cold and absolute, that he was going to die, and then Rex, charging through the chaos, teeth bared, eyes wild, dragging him by the webbing of his vest, pulling him inch by agonizing inch to safety. Adam pressed his hands against his face, feeling the grit and rain and tears mixing into a filthy, bitter paste. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be possible, and yet here he was, staring into the ruins of his past, led here not by coincidence, not by madness, but by Rex himself. The dog turned to look at him now, eyes glowing faintly in the stormlight, pleading once more. Adam forced himself to stand, wiping his hands on his sodden jeans, and stumbled toward the trench's edge. The mud sucked greedily at his boots, as if trying to claim him back. He ignored it. He had to see, he had to know why Rex had brought him here. In that split second, Adam saw something glinting amid the wreckage below, a faint metallic shimmer, half buried in the sludge and debris. A ripple of recognition ran through him. It was not random. He slid 1 foot into the trench, the mud swallowing it hungrily, and slowly, carefully, he began his descent, the storm howling louder, the shadows pressing closer, the weight of a forgotten past crushing down on him with every step. Adam slid awkwardly into the trench, his hands scrabbling against the slick, mud-caked walls for purchase as he half fell, half climbed down. The ground was soft, sucking at his boots, trying to claim him like it had tried all those years ago. He landed hard, one knee sinking deep into the muck with a sickening squelch. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself upright, wiping rain and grime from his eyes. Rex was already there, standing ankle-deep in the slurry, head lowered, nose working furiously. The dog's paws dug into the soft earth with frantic urgency, spraying mud and water in all directions. Rex paused danklets, the new, sharper kind of fear. He didn't know what Rex was trying to uncover, but every instinct told him it mattered, that it mattered more than anything else in the world right now. "Easy, boy," Adam muttered, voice hoarse and trembling, but Rex ignored him, clawing at the ground as if something vital was buried just beneath the surface. Adam dropped to his knees beside him, sinking into the mud without caring, and began to dig with his bare hands, feeling the cold, wet earth clog under his fingernails. The sharp scrape of unseen rocks cutting into his palms. Together, man and dog tore at the earth, rain plastering their bodies, thunder snarling overhead. Then, with a sudden gasp of surprise, Adam's fingers struck metal. He froze. Rex let out a low, whimpering sound, pawing more delicately now as Adam scraped away the remaining clumps of mud. It was a box, no bigger than a shoebox, battered and rusted almost beyond recognition. The edges were warped, and the latch was corroded, barely clinging to the battered lid. Adam hesitated, heart hammering, the cold rain dripping from his chin onto the lid of the box. What the hell was this? Why here? Why now? With trembling fingers, he pried the latch loose. It gave way with a reluctant screech, the sound barely audible over the storm's fury. Slowly, almost reverently, Adam lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in layers of disintegrating oilcloth and stained parchment, were letters. Dozens of them, some tied with fraying bits of string, others folded neatly but yellowed with time. His breath caught painfully in his chest. His name was scrawled across many of the envelopes, the ink running and faded but still unmistakable. With hands that shook uncontrollably, Adam lifted the first letter from the pile. The paper was thin, fragile as ancient skin, and his fingers trembled as he unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Mom. His mother's looping, careful script stared back at him, instantly collapsing the years, reducing the distance between past and present to nothing. He read the first line, and the words hit him like a bullet straight to the gut. "Dear Adam, I know you're scared, I am too, but wherever you go, whatever happens, remember you carry my heart with you." His vision blurred, rain and tears indistinguishable. He pressed the paper to his forehead for a moment, his whole body racked by silent sobs. He had never seen this letter before. Never. After he enlisted, he had moved so quickly, so desperately, he hadn't allowed himself time to stop, to reflect, to feel. He hadn't opened the letters, hadn't wanted to feel the weight of what he might lose if he let himself hope too much. He set the first letter aside with shaking care and reached for another. This one was written in a tight, anxious script he recognized instantly from Claire. His heart stuttered painfully. Claire. The girl he had left behind, the one he had never truly said goodbye to, never apologized to for the way he had just disappeared into the machine of war without warning. He unfolded the second letter with agonizing slowness, bracing for the impact. "I don't know if you'll ever get this," it began, "but I need you to know that I never stopped waiting. I never stopped hoping you would come back to me." Adam let out a ragged sound, something between a laugh and a sob, as he crumpled forward, clutching the letter to his chest. Guilt, long buried but never truly dead, rose in his throat like bile. How many nights had Claire waited by a phone that never rang? How many mornings had she woken up hoping for a letter that never arrived? And he had been too afraid to face it, too afraid to carry the weight of what he might lose if he admitted he needed someone waiting for him. Hands slick with rain and mud, Adam fumbled for another envelope. This one was different, older, more battered. It wasn't addressed in anyone else's hand. It was his own. Confused, he unfolded it carefully. The words were clumsy, earnest, written by a younger version of himself who still believed in things like promises and redemption. "To myself," it read, "in case I forget who I am." Adam stared at the letter, the words swimming before his eyes. It was a letter he had written to himself the night before shipping out, when fear and adrenaline had waged war inside him. A desperate reminder. "You are more than the things you survive. You are the son who promised to come home. You are the man who loves, even when it hurts. You are not just a weapon. You are not just a soldier. You are Adam Cole, and you are worth saving. The paper slipped from his numb fingers, landing in the mud with a soft, accusing sound. Adam knelt there, surrounded by ghosts, clutching his chest as if to hold himself together by sheer force of will. Above him, Rex let out a low, mournful whine, as if he understood, as if he were urging Adam to remember, to reclaim something he had abandoned long ago in the blood-soaked dirt of battlefields and broken dreams. Adam wiped his face with a trembling hand, gathering the letters back into the battered box with the reverence of a man handling sacred relics. Each slip of paper, each fading word, was a thread tying him to a life he had tried too hard to forget. A life he realized with a dawning, agonizing clarity he might still have a chance to. Rex turned away from the box, his body tense, his gaze locked on something deeper within the trench's collapsing heart. Without hesitation, without a sound, the dog began to move again, deeper into the darkness that waited beyond the glinting remnants of Adam's past. Adam clutched the battered metal box to his chest, the letters inside feeling heavier than any rifle he had ever carried. His legs trembled as he forced himself upright, boots squelching in the mud, heart pounding in an uneven, broken rhythm. Rex waited a few paces ahead, his sodden fur bristling with tension, his body taut like a bowstring. The dog's gaze flicked between Adam and the deeper trench beyond, where shadows seemed to pulse with an unseen life. Adam hesitated, the wind howling around him, rain slicing across his skin like knives. He knew deep in the marrow of his bones that whatever lay ahead wasn't just another memory, wasn't just another ghost. It was reckoning he had spent years outrunning. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the ruins of the battlefield, the carcass of a place that had claimed so much of him. He fumbled with his pocket, pulling free an old, dented Zippo lighter, the engraving on its side worn nearly smooth. His thumb scraped against the wheel, sparks dancing and dying before the flame finally caught, a frail, flickering beacon against the dark. Holding the lighter aloft with one hand and the box against his ribs with the other, Adam stumbled forward. Rex moved with him, his steps slow, deliberate, his body tense. They crossed the trench floor, past crumbling sandbags and rusted shell casings half buried in the mire. The deeper they moved, the tighter the air seemed to grow, as if the very earth were holding its breath. Adam found a sheltered hollow in the side of the trench, a place where the mud formed a shallow alcove shielded from the rain. He crouched there, setting the box carefully in the driest patch he could find, shielding the lighter flame with his cupped hand. One by one he unfolded the letters again, rereading them under the guttering light, his mother's words soft and steady, carrying the unconditional love he had tried so hard to sever himself from. Claire's confessions, raw and aching, slicing through the numb shell he had built around his heart. And his own letter, the desperate manifesto of a boy who had still believed he was something worth saving. As he read, the truth peeled itself raw before him, undeniable and savage. He had spent all these years thinking he was strong because he had survived, because he had buried the pain deep enough that it rarely bled through the cracks. But survival wasn't the same as healing. It wasn't the same as facing what he had lost, what he had abandoned. Adam realized with a crushing weight that he had never truly fought the darkness inside him. He had only hidden from it, buried it under layers of silence and duty and self-inflicted exile. He had mistaken numbness for resilience. He had mistaken forgetting for victory, and in doing so he had betrayed every promise he had ever made to his mother, to Claire, to Rex, to himself. Tears blurred his vision again, hot against the chill of the rain. His chest heaved with a silent, racking sob that bent him forward, forehead nearly touching the mud. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice hoarse and broken, the words ripped from somewhere deeper than his lungs, from a place he hadn't dared acknowledge in years. "I'm so damn sorry. For leaving, for shutting himself off, for letting the best parts of himself rot away while he clung to the shrapnel of what he thought a soldier was supposed to be." The lighter guttered, the flame shrinking as the fuel neared its end. In the dim light, Adam lifted his head and froze. Rex stood a few feet away, watching him. But something was different. The rain passed right through him now, the droplets scattering like mist. His form flickered at the edges, wavering, as if he were nothing more than a reflection on a trembling pond. "Rex," Adam croaked, terror and grief twining together into a single, unbearable thread. The dog didn't move, didn't whimper, didn't bark. He simply stared at Adam with those same impossibly steady eyes, the same loyalty, the same quiet, boundless forgiveness. And slowly, inexorably, his form began to thin, to dissipate, the outlines of his body unraveling into tendrils of mist that the storm greedily devoured. "No, please." He reached out a trembling hand, nearly slipping in the mud, the box tumbling from his grasp and scattering the precious letters into the wet dirt. "No, please." He reached out a trembling hand, fingers outstretched, but his touch met only cold air. Rex's shape wavered like smoke caught in a wind, the glow of his eyes the last to fade. The lighter sputtered violently, the tiny flame shrinking to a faint, gasping whisper. Adam fell to his knees again, chest heaving, the sound of the storm swallowing his broken sobs. Rex had led him here, had dragged him, kicking and screaming, back to the very place where he had died inside, to force him to see, to remember, to feel. And now, with the truth laid bare, Rex was leaving him once more. But this time, Adam understood. This time, he knew it wasn't because Rex was abandoning him, it was because Rex had done what he had come to do. Because the battle wasn't out here anymore, it was inside. Adam closed his eyes, the rain washing over him, mixing with the tears he no longer had the strength to hide, the wind roaring like a living thing in his ears, as if the very earth itself were trying to tear him apart and remake him in the process. Adam lurched forward, propelled by a raw animal desperation he could not have stopped if he tried. The battered letters scattered around him were forgotten. The storm raging overhead was forgotten. The mud sucking at his boots, the pain lancing up his injured knee, all of it forgotten. His entire world had narrowed to that single, flickering image of Rex dissolving into mist. He stumbled, half running, half crawling across the muck-slicked trench floor, reaching out blindly, heart hammering with the terrible certainty that if he could just grab hold, just touch, just anchor himself to Rex for one more second, he could somehow stop this, somehow rewind what was slipping away. Rex. The name tore itself from his throat, ragged and broken, a last-ditch plea hurled against the roaring wind. He lunged, arms outstretched, and met only emptiness. His hands closed around nothing but cold, damp air. He fell hard onto his knees, the impact jarring through his entire body, and for a moment he simply knelt there, stunned, head bowed, the mud seeping into the fabric of his jeans and jacket, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow him whole. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something glint faintly in the dying light of the lighter's final flicker. His heart clenched violently. Slowly, as if afraid to disturb whatever fragile magic remained, Adam reached out. His fingers brushed against something solid and familiar, a thin, frayed length of leather, soaked and worn soft with age, tangled in the mud. He lifted it with trembling hands, and there, dangling from the loop, was a small, battered tag. Recognition struck him like a hammer. It was Rex's collar, the very same collar he had buckled around the dog's strong neck on their first deployment together, hands steady despite the chaos swirling around them. It had survived everything, firefights, storms, years of separation, and now, it was all that remained. Adam cradled the collar in his hands, the leather rough against his palms, the metal tag cold and heavy. His breath caught painfully in his throat as he turned the tag over with his thumb, expecting to see the familiar information. Rex's name, his unique designation, maybe some old scuffed numbers. But there was something else now, something new, something he had never seen before, etched into the worn surface, barely visible but undeniably there. Were words delicate, careful, and heartbreakingly precise. "When you forget you are worthy, I will remind you." Adam stared at the inscription, blinking against the rain and tears that blurred his vision, trying to process the simple, devastating weight of those words. He ran his thumb across them again, as if trying to imprint them onto his skin, into his bones. This wasn't just a message, it was a lifeline, a promise, a final act of devotion from a companion who had refused to let him die, not just on the battlefield but here, now, drowning in his own despair. His body shook with the force of suppressed sobs. The collar pressed tight against his chest as if it could somehow fill the cavernous void opening inside him. All the years he had spent running from himself, from his pain, from his failures, were laid bare by those few simple words. Rex hadn't just been a partner, a protector. He had been a witness to Adam's worst moments, to his greatest fears, to the hollow man he had allowed himself to become. And even knowing all of that, even seeing him at his most broken, Rex had still believed, still trusted that Adam was something more than the scars he carried, something more than the weight he couldn't put down. Adam pressed his forehead against the collar, squeezing his eyes shut, letting the rain and the wind and the mud erase everything but the feeling of that slim, precious piece of leather between his fingers. "I'm sorry," he whispered again, voice cracking, carried off by the storm, swallowed by the yawning trench around him. I forgot who I was." His words weren't an apology to the sky or the past, or even to himself. They were for Rex, for the steadfast presence that had never stopped fighting for him, even when he had given up the fight himself. The lighter sputtered violently once more and died, plunging the trench into a deeper, more absolute darkness. For a moment, Adam sat there, utterly still, the collar gripped tightly in both hands, as if afraid that letting go would mean losing Rex all over again. Then, slowly, he lifted his head. The night was vast and brutal around him, the wind keening through the shattered remnants of the trench like a chorus of lost souls. But somewhere beneath the chaos, he thought he heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound. A heartbeat. Or maybe not a sound at all. Maybe it was a feeling. A thrum deep in his chest, as if something long dormant was stirring. He pushed himself shakily to his feet, knees protesting. His clothes were soaked and filthy, plastered to his skin, and his fingers were numb with cold, but he barely noticed. He tucked the collar carefully into his jacket, close to his heart, as if it were a compass he could not afford to lose. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Adam didn't feel hollow. He didn't feel numb. He felt something else, something raw and sharp and alive. Rex hadn't saved him by pulling him from the trenches once. He had saved him again tonight, not by dragging his broken body to safety, but by forcing him to see that survival wasn't enough. Living, truly living, meant carrying the scars without letting them define you. Meant remembering that worth wasn't earned on a battlefield but proven in the quiet, relentless act of refusing to give up on yourself. Adam squared his shoulders, feeling the rain battering against him, the mud sucking at his boots, the darkness pressing down. He didn't know where the next steps would take him. He didn't know if he could fix what he had broken, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't done. Not yet, not by a long shot. Clutching the collar close, Adam turned toward the deeper shadows at the end of the trench, where the storm raged even harder, where the answers still waited, buried in the mud and blood and memory he had finally stopped running from. The storm still howled as Adam staggered back through the battered landscape, the collar tucked tightly against his heart, the trench slowly disappearing behind him, swallowed by the darkness and rain. His body ached with every step, each movement a laborious act of will, but he kept going, driven by something deeper than exhaustion, deeper even than the old pain now tearing open inside him. The night had not lessened. If anything, the storm had grown fiercer, the rain hammering the earth like fists, the wind shrieking through the skeletal trees. Adam pressed on, boots sloshing through pools of water, jackets plastered to his skin, his fingers clenched around the collar hidden beneath the layers of soaked fabric as if drawing strength from the memory it carried. By the time he caught sight of the broken outline of the house, it seemed less a shelter and more a hollowed-out ghost, a shell battered by years and storms and silence. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled up the porch steps, one hand dragging along the rotting banister for balance. Reaching the front door, he paused, pressing his forehead against the rough wood, gathering himself. The night pressed in on all sides, heavy and insistent. He needed to end this, to step back into the life he had abandoned, to reclaim something before it slipped away for good. He reached for the door handle, pushed it open with a grating squeal, and stepped inside, cold rain trailing behind him. The house smelled of damp and earth, of old wood and dust disturbed by too many restless nights. Adam pushed the door halfway shut, leaning heavily against it, ready to seal himself back into the hollow solitude he had crafted over the years. But as he turned to close it completely, movement caught his eye. A figure stood just beyond the edge of the porch light, barely illuminated, blurred by the driving rain. Adam's heart leapt into his throat. Instinct had him reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. He squinted into the gloom, hand still on the door, body tensed. "Who's there?" His voice cracked raw from shouting against the storm. The figure stepped forward slowly, hesitantly, and under the flickering porch light, Adam saw a young man, mid-20s maybe, hair plastered to his forehead, jacket dripping with rain, face pale but set with a strange, haunted determination. Adam's breath caught painfully. Something about the posture, the eyes, the way he held himself was like looking into a mirror turned back a decade and twisted by grief. The realization struck him like lightning. "Danny," he rasped, disbelief and confusion warring inside him. The young man, Danny, nodded once, a tight, almost fearful movement as if expecting to be pushed away. Adam stumbled back a step, clutching the doorframe for support, mind spinning. Danny, his kid brother, the boy he had last seen clinging to their mother's leg the night the foster system had ripped them apart. The boy he had failed to protect, failed to find, failed to save. Adam had searched years ago, before the war consumed him, before guilt and rage smothered everything else. He had found nothing, and eventually he had stopped looking, convinced that even if Danny were alive, he would be better off without a brother like him. "It's really you," Adam whispered, voice breaking under the weight of memory. Danny stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair, eyes locked onto Adam's with a desperate intensity. "I've been looking for you," he said, his voice rough but steady, cutting through the roar of the storm, "for a long time." Adam swallowed hard, still gripping the doorframe like it might anchor him to this surreal, impossible moment. "How? Why?" He couldn't form the words. Danny glanced down, pulling something from the inside pocket of his soaked jacket. It was a photograph, water-stained but still recognizable, a younger Adam in uniform, one arm slung proudly around the neck of a massive German shepherd, Rex. Danny held the picture out like a talisman. "I didn't find you," he said. "He did." Adam's stomach twisted painfully. He stepped forward, plucking the photograph from Danny's hand with trembling fingers, staring at the familiar image as if it might rearrange itself into something that made sense. "Rex?" Adam whispered. Danny nodded, stuffing his hands deep into his jacket pockets, shifting awkwardly from foot to foot. "A year ago," he said, voice low, "I was living rough. Cold nights, bad neighborhoods, nobody giving a damn whether I froze to death or not. Then one night, in the middle of nowhere, during a storm just like this one, a dog found me. Big German shepherd, old but strong. He dragged me into an abandoned shed, curled up around me, kept me warm, kept me alive." Adam stared at him, heart hammering. Danny shrugged helplessly, a boy's gesture trapped in a man's broken body. "Thought I was hallucinating, but when I woke up the next morning, he was gone. Just all that was left was this picture tucked under my jacket." He tapped the photograph in Adam's hand. "I didn't know what it meant at first, but I held on to it, followed every lead I could, every scrap of information about a soldier and a dog who looked like the ones in that picture." His eyes burned bright in the stormlight. "It led me here, it led me to you." Adam's throat worked convulsively, trying and failing to form a response. His fingers closed tighter around the photograph, crumpling the edges. Rex. Even after death, even after memory, Rex had found a way to bring them together, to heal what the world had broken. Adam staggered back a step, overwhelmed, the port swimming before his eyes. Danny caught his arm instinctively, steadying him with a firm, familiar grip. For a moment, the brothers reunited not by blood or chance, but by the stubborn, unyielding loyalty of a dog who had refused to let either of them be lost forever. Adam opened his mouth, but whatever words he meant to say were swallowed by the wind. Inside the house, the shadows stirred, restless and waiting, and somewhere beyond the storm, something deeper, older, and far more dangerous was waiting. The storm raged through the night, but inside the broken walls of the house, there was a different kind of silence. One heavy not with despair, but with something rawer, something closer to hope. Adam sat on the floor near the fireplace, his back against the cold stone, the box of letters resting beside him. Danny dozed fitfully in the battered armchair across the room, one hand still loosely clutching the old photograph of Adam and Rex. as if afraid that letting it go might shatter the fragile new bridge between them. Adam watched the boy, the man, really with a complicated ache twisting inside him. So much was lost, so much time wasted, but maybe, just maybe, something still salvageable. He rested his head back against the stone, the collar tucked under his jacket warm against his heart, and let the exhaustion seep into his bones. Outside, the rain finally began to slacken, the furious wind dying down to an exhausted whisper. The night, battered and bruised, began to bleed into a softer, tentative gray. Adam didn't sleep, not really, but drifted somewhere between waking and dreams. The kind of half-conscious state where memories and reality blurred together, where ghosts sit quietly beside you, offering neither comfort nor fear. When he finally stirred, hours or minutes later, he blinked and realized the world had changed. The darkness had receded, replaced by the tentative blue of early dawn. The air still smelled of rain and mud and broken things, but there was a cleanness to it now, a clarity that hadn't been there before. Adam pushed himself upright, muscles protesting, and crossed the room on stiff legs. He nudged the door open with his shoulder, stepping out onto the porch. The world beyond was a battlefield made peaceful by the retreat of the storm. Branches littered the yard, puddles reflected the slowly brightening sky, and the battered house stood sentinel against it all, stubborn in its survival. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold, rain-washed air fill his lungs, grounding him in a way he hadn't felt in years. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Adam didn't feel like he was drowning, didn't feel like he was an intruder in his own life. The loneliness, the cold, crushing isolation that had been his constant companion for so many endless nights, was behind him. He heard the creak of the door and turned to see Danny stepping out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The boy gave him a small, uncertain smile, one that Adam found himself returning without thinking. They stood side by side, two figures weathered and worn but upright, facing a world that, for the first time in years, felt just a little less hostile. As the first true rays of sunlight broke over the ragged treetops, slicing through the mist with golden precision, Adam felt it before he saw it. A shift in the air, a tightening in his chest that was not fear or pain, but something gentler, sadder, infinitely more precious. He turned his head slightly, and there, in the corner of his vision, at the edge of the broken yard, stood a figure, not solid, not corporeal, not something his eyes could truly grasp, but he felt it. Deep down in the marrow of him he knew. Rex, the dog, stood proud, tail lifted, body relaxed but alert, as if guarding him one last time. In the golden light, Rex's form shimmered slightly, indistinct at the edges, almost blending into the morning mist. But Adam didn't need sight to recognize him. He knew that posture, knew the way Rex held himself, unwavering even in the face of uncertainty. Tears pricked at Adam's eyes, but he didn't blink them away. He wanted to see, even if only with his heart. Rex lifted his head slightly, tail giving a slow, deliberate wag, the same gesture he used to give after every successful mission, every hard-won victory, every time they made it out alive when the odds said they shouldn't. Adam's breath caught painfully in his throat. He opened his mouth, 1,000 words crowding against each other. "Thank you, I'm sorry, I remember." But no sound came out. And somehow, he knew he didn't need to say it. Rex already knew. The sunlight grew stronger, burning away the mist inch by inch, and as it did, Rex's form grew lighter, less distinct, until he was nothing but a shimmer in the golden haze, and then nothing at all. Adam stood frozen, chest aching with a bittersweet fullness, the empty yard stretching out before him, the world impossibly, heartbreakingly bright. And he shifted beside him, glancing at him with a question in his eyes. But Adam simply shook his head, a small, sad smile curving his lips. Some things were too big, too sacred to be put into words. He let the silence between them stand, a bridge instead of a wall. Slowly he stepped down from the porch, boots sinking slightly into the wet earth. The ground was littered with debris, the aftermath of the storm, but in the rising light even the wreckage seemed beautiful, a testament not to destruction but to survival. Behind him, Danny followed without hesitation. Adam didn't know where they were going, not exactly. Didn't know what the next day would bring or the next battle he would have to fight inside himself. But he knew he wouldn't be fighting alone anymore, and somewhere, just beyond the reach of his senses, he felt it again. The faint brush of fur against his side, the whisper of paws on the earth, the steady, unwavering presence of a friend who had never truly left. The morning sunlight filtered through the broken windows, casting long, warm beams across the battered floorboards, painting the ruins of the old house in hues of gold and soft gray. Adam moved slowly through the space, every step deliberate, feeling the weight of every breath, every heartbeat, as if he were rediscovering the mechanics of being alive. Danny followed a few steps behind, quiet, giving Adam the space he needed. The house smelled of rain and wood, and something else now, something cleaner, lighter, like the first breath after a long submersion. Adam crossed the living room, his boots making soft sounds against the floor, and his gaze fell naturally, inevitably, to the coffee table where it all had nearly ended. The revolver still lay there, heavy and inert, its dark metal gleaming dully in the morning light. For a long moment, Adam simply stared at it, feeling the ghost of the despair that had gripped him not so long ago. But it didn't have the same pull anymore. It didn't whisper promises of escape or peace. It was just a thing, a tool, an object robbed of its terrible power. He stepped closer, breath steady, heart steady, and reached down. His fingers closed around the cold metal, lifting it from the table, feeling its familiar weight in his palm. Danny shifted slightly in the doorway but said nothing. Adam turned the revolver over in his hands once, then again, studying it not with fear or hatred but with a calm, clinical detachment. He found the latch and pressed it, the cylinder swinging free with a soft, mechanical click. He tipped the gun gently, letting the bullets slide out into his other hand, their dull brass surfaces catching the light. One by one, he set them down carefully on the table. Then he moved methodically, stripping the revolver apart with the ease of long practice. He removed the grip, the cylinder, the hammer assembly, placing each piece on the table like sacred artifacts being laid to rest. Each part he disassembled felt like uncoiling a knot inside his chest, like peeling away the layers of grief and guilt and rage he had wrapped around himself for so long. By the time the gun lay in pieces before him, a simple scattering of metal and wood, Adam felt lighter, freer than he could ever remember being. He stood there for a moment, hands resting lightly on the table's edge, breathing deeply, absorbing the finality of what he had done. It wasn't just about disarming the weapon. It was about disarming the part of himself that had believed death was the only escape. It was about choosing life in all its messy, painful, beautiful imperfection. He straightened slowly, his movements fluid, unhurried, and turned toward the door. Danny met his gaze, something unspoken passing between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the moment's weight. Adam gave a small nod, and without another word, he moved past his brother and pushed open the door to the porch. The sunlight was stronger now, bathing the world in a brilliance that made the broken landscape seem almost beautiful. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. Adam stepped out onto the porch, feeling the warmth seep into his skin, feeling the gravity that had tethered him to the darkness begin to lift. He walked to the edge of the porch and stood there, head tilted back, letting the sun wash over him. And then, without meaning to, without planning or forcing it, he laughed. It started as a small, incredulous sound, a breathy huff of disbelief that escaped his throat. But it grew, swelling into a full-bodied laugh that shook his shoulders, that echoed off the trees and the broken walls and the vast open sky. He laughed for Rex, for the stubborn, loyal soul who had refused to let him die alone. He laughed for Danny, for the miracle of a brother found when all hope had been lost. He laughed for himself, for the boy he had been, for the man he had become, for the road still stretching before him, uncertain and treacherous, and achingly alive. Tears streamed down his face again, but this time they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release, of relief, of a heart breaking open after being locked away for too long. He turned his face to the sun, eyes closed, arms hanging loosely at his sides, and simply stood there, breathing, laughing, living. Somewhere just beyond the reach of sight and sound, he could feel it again. The brush of fur against his side, the steady, reassuring weight of Rex's presence. Not a ghost, but a memory, a promise, a part of him that would never leave. Adam opened his eyes, the world sharp and vivid around him, and took a step forward, off the porch into the soft, forgiving mud of the yard. Danny followed, their shadows stretching long and side by side across the torn earth. Together they walked toward the road that wound away from the house, away from the past, toward something new. Adam didn't know what lay ahead, didn't know how hard the journey would be, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid. He was ready, ready to fight, ready to heal, ready to live. The sun climbed higher, burning away the last remnants of the storm, and the world opened wide before them, vast and wild and waiting. If this story touched you, if you felt every heartbeat, every breath, every struggle Adam fought through, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us bring more stories like this to life and reminds us that even the quietest battles matter. I'd love to hear what part of the story hit you the hardest. Was it Rex standing one last time in the dawn light? Was it the moment Adam finally chose to live? Share your thoughts in the comments and let me know where in the world you're watching from. Every story finds a different heart. Maybe today it found yours.